It's realizing that we've been staring at shadows, we've been studying shadows, we've been listening to shadows. And the reason why we're doing that is because we don't want to face the guilt, but mostly we're not willing to look at the decision to not face the guilt. Welcome back to one's journey of unwinding the mind and, of course, your daily microdose. Now tune in to the latest episode of One's Journey. Today I want to talk about something that many of you might already have heard of in school or just around the block, but I want to talk about Plato's allegory of the cave and how, in fact, a lot of the videos I share are very similar to it. So I want to start with a little background information on what the allegory of the cave is, and then go from there, more of my interpretation. So the stuff I'm going to share with you right now is read, so we have some sufficient credit where credit is due. So the allegory of the cave is a Socratic dialogue recorded by Greek philosopher Plato. Plato, if you didn't know, was a student of Socrates and one of the few people to write down some of his many teachings, which were eventually compiled into their own books, blah, blah. The Republic is one such book containing the allegory of the cave, and it's a dialogue between Socrates and Plato's brother, Glaucon, as presented by Plato. Socrates' allegory of the cave imagines a group of people who are chained together inside an underground cave as prisoners. Behind the prisoners, there's a fire. Mind you, the prisoners can't see this fire. And between the prisoners and the fire are moving puppets and real objects on a raised walkway with a low wall. However, the prisoners cannot see anything behind them. Again, remember that, as they have been chained and stuck looking in one direction at the cave of the wall their whole lives. Essentially, what has happened is the truth to these prisoners, what is truth, what is their reality, are the actual shadows on the wall. The shadows of the true things that are behind them, which is outside of the cave. So I know oftentimes it's referred to as like social media or the internet or things like that is like that screen between us and reality. And yeah, those are many examples, but what a lot of people are missing is that in fact, this entire illusion are the shadows on the wall. We talk a lot about becoming the dreamer of the dream, realizing that you are outside of the dream. You are not actually in this illusion, you are the dreamer of this illusion. Meaning, if we look back to Plato's allegory of the cave, you would in fact, realizing that you are the dreamer of the dream would take you outside and be able to see the whole picture of the actual tangible items in the fire and the wall, and you would see your own self sitting on that side of that cave and just believing what you see on the wall. In today's video, we're just going to talk about this surface, this brief overview of the comparison here, and there will be videos in the future where we dive deeper because there's actually stages that are laid out in coming out of that cave. And there's questions that are brought up of what if a prisoner escaped and they left? And it kind of reminds me of when maybe people do a psychedelic mushroom trip and they experience things that are not of this illusion and they freak the fuck out, right? Because when we are faced with something that it does not feel like it's reality to us, even if it is reality, it doesn't matter. You've been looking at the shadows on the wall for so long. That's all you know to be truth. And when someone tries to present something else, you're like, you're fucking crazy. And to be honest, I get that a lot from people. When they hear my information, they're either like, what the F are you talking about, right? Those are people that are very much still in the cave and still chained to the wall. Or I get people who are like, this is stupid, right? The ones that get irritated or pissed off. And those are people I think that are on their way out of the cave, but they're not quite ready yet. They're still really attracted to the images on the wall. And then we get the people who are like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this forever. And those are the people that are on the outside, but they really don't quite understand yet. But there's actual other stages of that for that individual person of what that looks like to eventually get out of the cage. But really, here in this illusion, everyone is studying the shadow. Everyone. So our scientists, are all the people in this world who are placing so much weight within this illusion are studying this illusion. They're understanding this illusion at different depths. And in fact, none of it is truth. The purpose of this shadow, again, is to keep the source hidden from the shadow, right? So in the allegory of the cave, the prisoners are meant to be hidden from the shadow, or to be hidden from the truth with the shadow, which here in this illusion, the source is we're hiding the guilt. We are not wanting to look at the guilt, so instead we've projected outward these shadows to instead distract us with shiny objects, because we are so freaking scared of the guilt, which is the truth, which is reality, or which would be the forgiveness needing to fully grasp that reality. And instead, we've just created this illusion of shadows. And that's why some things tend to mirror in ways that what would appear to be truth, because you can't create something you're not aware of. Like the allegory of the cave, they were actual structures and the shadows of them, but they needed that actual thing in order to have the shadow. And it keeps the decision. I think this is a big piece that was really eye-opening for me too, is that not only does it keep us hidden from the guilt, the shadow, keeps us distracted, I guess we could say, instead of hidden, but it keeps us distracted from the decision for the guilt, the decision to remain in that place of guilt and shame. We're not just distracting ourselves from the actual truth. We're distracting ourselves from the choice that we made to distract ourselves from the truth. Yeah, do you want me to say it again? So we're not exactly just distracting ourselves from the truth. We're distracting ourselves as well from the fact of the decision of distracting ourselves from the truth. Right? We are layers deep in this distraction game. And awareness is key. Not only have we distracted ourselves from a truth, we've distracted ourselves from the one thing that will provide us with the awareness that we are distracting ourselves from truth. Whether we look at it or not, it doesn't matter, but we have these immense shadows. And the ego doesn't care about the guilt, but it doesn't care about the guilt we carry, let's be honest, because that actually doesn't matter. What matters is our decision to keep the guilt. Our decision to not heal the guilt. So if we would just have a shadow or just have that shiny distraction to just avoid truth, but we also saw our decision to hold that guilt, we would make a decision not to hold it. So the ego cares nothing about us being distracted from our guilt, which is the way in front of truth. But the ego actually cares about us being distracted from the reality of our decision of guilt, the decision to go with guilt, the decision to go with the ego into the illusion because of the guilt. Guilt is the essential first smokescreen that occurred, that created this whole trajectory of things that got us into the cave, into the illusion. But it's literally like when I talk about the smoke screens, right? All these smoke screens occurring, human design, all this other stuff that's just getting in the way even more and distracting us more from truth. The initial one was the guilt. And then we made the decision to run from the guilt, right? That's the smoke screen right there. And then the body became the second smoke screen to observe with everything outside. We needed something to make us feel that in fact these shadows were real. So what better way than to create this vessel that operates with the shadows and is a shadow itself to interact with everything else? I know I've got your mind thinking, because even mine, in the process of talking this out with you, as I've said before, the more I teach, the more I learn. And you have no idea how many aha moments I have even in creating these videos for you. And they just keep coming. So the body cannot see the guilt as it rose from the guilt. in order to protect the guilt. If we talk about that guilt being that first smoke screen, that first distraction, and the choice to not look at it, the choice to run from it and jump into a body, the body cannot acknowledge the guilt because the body is actually the vessel to distract us from the guilt. I know, right? Mind blown. Mind blown. Again, the body cannot see the guilt because the guilt and the choice to distract ourselves from the guilt and jump into this vessel that we call a body and experience death and birth and pain and separation was created out of that decision to not face the guilt. Wow. This might be a video you have to watch a couple times. And again, like I said, we will dig deeper, much deeper. And the fact is, if you're in this body, this vessel of ultimate separation, and it was used to to distract you from that decision to not face the guilt, then if you don't see it, I won't change it, right? And that's what the ego wants. That's what the ego belief system wants, is for you to be so much in this body, which is the vessel that helps you stay away from the guilt, or so you think. We're constantly re-experiencing it within here in different manners, but it keeps you from it. Because it keeps you distracted, just like the shadows on the wall. It keeps you distracted. So essentially we could see like the body as the chains, the thing that keeps us chained. And what if the chains actually were never, have you seen those elephants that they're just on this tiny little stick, but they're chained, and when they're adults, they don't run away because they grew up that way and they're always like, oh, well, I'm chained here. So what if that's the case? What if as we continue in this illusion and it becomes more real to us, we once realized like the chain isn't chained to anything. I just thought it was because everybody else around me told it was, and it never actually was. And the reason why it felt like I was chained was because the adults in my life when I was younger were telling me you're chained, telling me that's the reality. I knew different, but when you get told something over and over again so many times, you begin to believe it's truth. Just like sitting there watching the shadows on the wall over and over again. The biggest piece with the guilt is if I expose the unreality of the guilt, me as this body, right? We'll say I'm this body. Then that would mean I would need to expose the unreality of me, aka this body not being real. My individuality not being real. Holy shit, I should do a video on that because individuality is such a stronghold that we have in this illusion. And I was a part of that as well. But the fact of the matter is that's one of the largest things we have to get through. If I expose the unreality of the guilt, I expose the unreality of me. I expose the individuality, all of that. So, of course, give me all the shadows. Then I don't have to face the truth of what really got me here. And you just believe it to be true. Those shadows, like they're shiny. They allow you to constantly project new shadows of any new shame and guilt that comes up within you. You're just casting new shadows on the cave wall like crazy to externalize what is going on within the mind. Because you're not willing to face it. We're not willing to face it. The mind isn't. Because we made that decision to not face the guilt and to run from the guilt. And now we can't even see that we made that decision unless we take an active effort and untie it, right? Like we are, but most people aren't. Most people are just like going along their life thinking they suffer and life is awful and that these shadows are truth. What we're studying here in this illusion is studying the external manifestations, which are the shadows. So the studying that's occurring within the illusion is actually us studying what is going on in the mind because it's all a projection of the mind. So that's really interesting to wrap your head around too, and I'll definitely dig deeper on that. All systems of thought are studying the shadow. Recently, my mentor sent me an article in the UK that they're questioning any of their past research, I believe, on like neuropsychology and how maybe they had it wrong and that the brain and the mind are two different things. And it was just amazing to see that maybe they're starting to wrap their head around the possibility that they've just been studying the shadows, that they actually haven't been studying truth It's the shadows, the projections of the truth. Prisoners, again, all they see are the shadows. That's all we see are the shadows, the projections. But we think they're reality. And when somebody else tries to tell us they're not, it's really fucking hard to receive. And we think they're crazy and we get prickled and all the other things. But when we dig deeper on the allegory of the cave, we'll go through those stages, right? And they're not easy stages. And you being here means you are going through these stages. And know that this is not an easy journey. It's simple, but it's not always easy. Yeah. Oh, senses. That was another thing. It's like the horizon. You know how the horizon is deceiving? Or not like the horizon. So your senses, the senses that we have in order to experience the external world, which AKA the ability to experience the shadows, they play tricks on us. Our senses sometimes make us believe something is not true, and the horizon is one of them. And the moon, that with the horizon and the moon, it's like if you put your thumb or whatever where the moon is here, even when it looks huge, it's still the same size. But because of the horizon and where it's located in your vision, it impacts that. And there's tons of other ways our senses fuck with us all the time. I have a friend that does blindfold dinners. And you'd be amazed at the things people think because they like because they couldn't see them. And how much color impacts us. If you do color studies, like color causes us to be more hungry and all those different things because our senses are not real, so they deceive us. Because we're taking in information from the shadows, which the shadows are not truth. Essentially, when we talk about realizing we're the dreamer of the dream, it's getting the fuck out of the cave. It's realizing that we've been staring at shadows, we've been studying shadows, we've been listening to shadows. And the reason why we're doing that is because we don't want to face the guilt, but mostly we're not willing to look at the decision to not face the guilt. The decision to run from the guilt and jump in the body and be in the shadow world. Whatever, that's what we'll call it. So in the process of untying is those realizations and the stages to move through that, to get back to reality and to untie yourself from this ego illusion, aka the shadows in the cave. We're just looking at shadows. This is not truth. Even this camera, as I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that shadow we created in this illusion. Feels fucked up to even say that, but it's truth. I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear questions you have. I would love to have concerns, respectful conversation regards your thoughts on this. And as always, until next time, remember you are worth it. I am so grateful you are part of this community because, again, big miracle energy does not exist without you.